We would like to thank the sponsors and partners that made this event possible: the City of Iowa City, the University of Iowa, the Iowa City Public Library, Prairie Lights, Iowa Public Radio, the Graduate Hotel, and Think Iowa City. Support was also provided by the Iowa Humanities Council and the National Endowment for the Humanities. The vast majority of book festival events are offered without charge, but they are not free. Please consider donating to the City of Literature by visiting iowacitybbookfestival.org and clicking on support. We want your feedback. Please also visit iowacitybbookfestival.org or scan the QR codes posted near the door and complete a brief survey to give us your feedback. And now we'll start, and I'll hand it off to Cecile.
Welcome to The Machine Stops, a new opera first performed at the Coralville Center for the Arts in 2022. I'm Cecile Goding, and I wrote the libretto based on a 1909 story by Forster. Before I introduce you to our lovely panel, I have a few little acknowledgments of my own, and I would like to acknowledge project support from the Iowa Arts Council and the National Endowment for the Arts, from private donors, and of course, our audiences. Much gratitude to our videographer, Dave Olive, who will make it possible for us to share this video on YouTube with the public in the very near future. Lastly, the Iowa City Public Library, the Iowa City Book Festival, and the UNESCO City of the Arts folks you've already heard about. Just out of curiosity, how many here today were able to see the opera on stage? Our Talkback session tonight is moderated by opera theater fan and my Shakespeare teacher, Miriam Gilbert. She's joined by science fiction scholar Brooks Landon, who wrote this big book about science fiction. Élise DesChamps from the School of Music, and of course the composer John Lake, and me. Also in the audience, and welcome to chime in at any time, is our producer and music director, Ed Kotick. Wave. So now I'm going to turn the mic over to Brooks, who will talk about the story on which our opera is based.
And I'm counting on Miriam to tell me when to stop. Early in the opera, Vashti sings, "This area of expertise is not my own." Boy, let me tell you, that's me. I know nothing about opera. I know very little about Forster. I don't even know a lot about H.G. Wells, since Wells and Forster were part of a British scientific romance tradition that's very different from the American tradition. And in fact, I had not read The Machine Stops for, I'd guess, a little over 25 years when I was last writing about it. And I thought, well, okay, I probably ought to reread it. And as I reread it, I was struck by so many ironies. And I'm going to try to mention just a few of those. The first irony is that Forster wrote it because he was really hacked at H.G. Wells. He didn't like what Wells was writing, and he was afraid that Wells was shaping the discourse too much in England. If you've read The Time Machine, you know that it sets up an underground world and an above-ground world. And that looks like something that Forster took from Wells. But The Time Machine was written in 1895, and The Machine Stops was first written in 1909. During the time between The Time Machine was written and the time when The Machine Stops was written, Wells wrote The Isle of Dr. Moreau in 1896, Invisible Man, 1897, War of the Worlds, 1898, When the Sleeper Awakes, 1899, First Men on the Moon, 1901, Food of the Gods, 1904, and a Modern Utopia in 1995. I'm pretty sure that it was a Modern Utopia that Forster was hacked by. And the first thing that I have to point out there is that a modern utopia is actually not about technology. It's about an epistemology, a philosophy. It's a socialist work. It is a utopian, but technology features in it only here and there. So I'm not exactly sure what Forster thought he was doing when he wrote The Machine Stops, but I will guarantee you that whatever he thought he was doing, he failed to do. Because the irony is that while his story made little or no impact when it was first published, or when it was republished in, what, 1928 or so?
1928.
It still made no impact. But what he did, without kind of willy-nilly, was that he managed to tap into an awful lot of science fiction icons and science fiction patterns and themes, and which I'm sure would really irk him no end, but those have been repeated through science fiction. So he actually had a fairly large impact on American science fiction, but it was a positive impact rather than a negative impact. And part of the humor here is that a lot of people who, when they go back and look at The Machine Stops, point out, oh my God, he was so good at predicting technology. Well, science fiction isn't about predicting things. In fact, most science fiction writers that I know actually kind of joke and say that science fiction is about preventing the future rather than predicting the future. And the whole point is that science fiction has to do with the interaction of humans and technology. And the focus is always on the humans. I would say that Forster, in writing The Machine Stops, was kind of strange on the human part. I mean, there's this huge conflict between a mother and her son, which I understand kind of parallels his life in some ways. I understand that either his mother was living with him or he was living with his mother until she died at 85. But the technology is simply pointed at. And here's the irony. In a lot of dystopian works, in order, if technology seems to be the target of it, you have to make the technology look pretty cool before you can make it look terrible. And what happens in science fiction is that people appropriate whatever they can and take away whatever they want and enroll whatever they want in the idea of science fiction. And what Forster willy-nilly was good at was, I mean, you know, here's a health machine that will simply come down from the ceiling and will fix whatever ails you. He's describing airships in 1909, when, as far as I know, the only airplanes at that time at most could hold a pilot and one person sitting beside them. The idea of an airliner is really kind of ridiculous. He's envisioning something like the internet. He's envisioning clearly all kinds of things that have actually come to pass, but he doesn't describe any of them. And while he was saying, okay, all of these things are dehumanizing, what has happened in science fiction is that people have read it and said, wow, that's pretty cool. What if the machine doesn't stop? And so the whole point in science fiction has been to try to present technology in a way that might be alarmist. But the secret is not to fight against the technology, because let's face it, if we all don't agree on this, if you fight against technology, you lose. It's that simple. But in science fiction, the point is to try to understand the human element and to try to focus on the way humans construct and use and in some cases limit technology. And of course, reading this thing now is really incredible, because with AI, with post-COVID, with airlines and everything, the technology that Forster described is still very much there. And if I'm running out of time, one last thing.
One last thing.
Here's an irony. Forster died in 1970. That was the year I graduated from college. In 1970, I'm wondering how many times, if ever, he had been in an airliner, whether it was a DC-4 or a DC-6 or a 707 or whatever, and looked down. And I'm wondering what he was thinking about technology in 1970 when he died. I'll just say one other thing. I've said what happens if the machine doesn't stop. The great editor and a very influential writer in American science fiction, John Campbell, wrote a story in 1932 entitled Twilight, and the whole point of his story was that the machines don't stop, but the humans stop. And the machines keep going, and all we have to do, according to Campbell, is give machines curiosity. So I'll stop there.
Thank you, Brooks. And you have already pointed us, I think, towards one of the central things, which is the extent to which science fiction is not about science, but about human beings and about that relationship. And it strikes me, and I'm going to turn to Cecile, who wrote the libretto, it strikes me that it must be, in some ways, the interest in what happens to human beings that may have attracted you, but you will set me straight. What got you going? What made you, after reading this short story, which I have read for the first time preparing for this, what was it about this story that made you say, I want to write a libretto and I think we should do an opera? In other words, pull back the curtain of the creative process. Cecile.
Well, as far as wanting to write a libretto.
You want to come closer
Yeah.
to this? Thank you.
Writing a libretto, I took a wonderful class when I was at the Writers' Workshop with Marvin Bell and David Gomper, who's the director of New Music. And so they put together 11 graduate composers and 11 poets and just said, make music. So that's the first time I just, fell in love with the magic of hearing my lines put to music. And so that's what made me want to write a libretto.
But what about this story? What grabbed you?
Well, I first read this story in the 70s. A librarian handed it to me. I was working at the Greenville, South Carolina Public Library, and he said, I think you'll really like this story. And it's just stuck with me through all the changes we've had in technology, Xerox machines and word processors and Facebook. And then I also wanted to choose a story that would appeal to people who weren't opera goers. Because one of the missions of the Machine Opera Company is to increase the interest in opera for people who might not have ever seen an opera, and they might have gone to the show just because it was science fiction.
So out with this, all the 19th century opera that I have
Yes.
grown up with.
Yes.
And in fact, so deliberately choosing a contemporary subject and something where the whole focus on what is the machine and how is it affecting people is central to what you were doing.
Yes, and I'm very interested in contemporary opera. That's when I go to the Des Moines Opera every summer, those are usually the ones that I look at first.
Okay. So as you were working on it, and I'll come to John in just a moment and that whole notion of contemporary opera, but as you were working on it, what was for you the most challenging thing to figure out as you were putting your story together? Because the opera does not exactly track the story. And there are big differences. The focus in the story is very much on the central female figure, Vashti, and what we are to think of her. And although her relationship with her son is crucial, the opera, in fact, starts with him. And you will get to see that in a little while. So I'm wondering what was the most difficult or the most challenging thing for you to put this together?
Well,
Your way.
okay, well, the story is a narrative. It's got a lot of exposition and description, and of course that doesn't work with the play. So I had to think of ways even to create scenes that aren't in the opera, in the story, that would make us understand the conflicts the characters were facing and to get their inner life brought more to the surface. So you have to do that through, playwriting with dialogue. And so that was probably the most challenging, is to getting feedback from Ed and others. They would ask questions, and I would thought, I need to write a scene or an aria about that to bring those feelings to the surface.
Right. And again, you're going to see the prologue, the first moments of the opera, which in a way give us a kind of a background to what has happened through one of the characters rather than through a narrator figure. So John, can I turn to you and say, when you got the libretto, I mean, was it a finished thing, or did you and Cecile have a lot of conversation as you were writing? I'm just interested in the process. I know it starts with her being turned on by this story and fascinated. What then happens to you as the composer?
Well, I was given, basically, it was like, oh, I get an opera commission, because, there was no, money or personnel involved yet, but to me, it was like an opportunity. She only had a little bit, I think you probably had like maybe the first act written.
Yeah.
And so we were really starting out with me just generating some ideas based on the libretto. And for me, actually, as a songwriter, it was kind of a relief to have all the words ready. It was like, okay, this is fun. I can just look at this and I think the chemistry between us was good because what she wrote actually was I would say it's very clean and spare. There wasn't a lot of verbiage in it, at least to my perception. So it gave me a lot of freedom to like make something long or make something short. Because I felt like I could generate ideas, and then, I had someone to bounce off of. And then later with Maestro Kotick, we have even somebody to kind of like say, well, this could be a little shorter, or the orchestration could be different here. And, I had people helping me to shape it, which made me feel like a team. And, I'd always been a rock player until I got interested in classical music. Long story short, I took a bunch of courses. And then, so when Cecile asked me, I thought, okay, well, maybe this is what I took all those courses for, because then I was ready to tackle it. I still had a lot to learn about composing and using music software, but what I really loved about it was that I could kind of, she gave me this raw material that I could then shape, and we can go back and forth on it to see what works. And, I have a fairly eclectic style. I include 19th century opera as part of what I think of when I'm writing, even though it doesn't necessarily come out like that. But, that's what was enjoyable about it.
And when you say back and forth, were there times when you said, I need more words, and can she write some more for this particular thing? Or were there times when you said, no, we need to cut that and let the music do it? I'm just wondering how much negotiation was going on.
We had a lot of conversations like that. He supplied some words, and I would say, well, I want the music to sound like birdsong or something, So, I would ride my bike over to his house every Monday, and we would work on this together, and we would have a lot of fun, a lot of laughs also.
A lot of laughs.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Not what I might have imagined with this particular story. I think we've got a whole other opera hiding in there as well. And then, can I ask one more question? And that is, you knew Élise was going to be singing the central role here?
Yes, after a certain point, we'd have,
Right.
probably a good part of it done, and then fortunately Ed said, well, I know just the person for this.
Right. So then the question becomes, to what extent are you writing for Elise's voice?
Well, I didn't hear Élise until later in the process. I just trusted that Ed had not good judgment, but great judgment, and I thought, okay, whatever as it is I'm writing, Ed will say whether that works or not, because he's more familiar with singers than I am.
Okay.
I got a lot of training at the School of Music, but it wasn't specifically for voice, so I really needed Ed's expertise there. And but it was just really exciting to finally get it to the point where the singers were singing it. That was, so I basically trusted Ed for that, and he, and when Élise came on, and the other singers too were all really exceptional.
Absolutely.
So I was lucky on that.
So now, Élise, you're also a collaborator, because I understand you were doing the early workshops of this and so forth.
Yes, I did.
So here you've got the libretto, you've got the music, you've got the role. What did you find particularly interesting, challenging, difficult, appealing? You can choose your adjective.
Well,
and go from
I think
there.
I found all of the above. I just, first of all, thank you for having me here. This has been just a beautiful journey with this score. I mean, it's a true modern opera, so an opera that it can be compared to what's happening at the Met right now, like Jake Heggie, Dead Man Walking. This is a tremendous score, and John, you did an incredible job.
Thank you.
Too. So it was a privilege to be given this opportunity, and it came from Mirabai. Maestro Goding heard me at the University Harbison's Mirabai with Dr. Gomper. And that was a difficult score. And so, and then we met at Encounters, and that was pre-pandemic. And so the first challenge was, and Mr. Landon, you mentioned post-pandemic. I think that was the primary challenge, was to, to be singing without a mask, and how we safe. And the score is written for Vashti. The role of Vashti is a mezzo-soprano with a tremendous range.
Both of the main roles require tremendous range.
Yes.
Your son, Kuno,
Yes.
he's a baritone, I gather, but my gosh, John, you have written some stratospheric high notes.
I did consult with him about that. I said, "Joe, is that too high?" I said, "No, I can do that."
No, it's great for the opera singer. It's a treat, and but it required some just to go practice and the intervals. And one of the challenges for me, I'm French Canadian, I'm from Quebec, was that the rock element of it that is more American. I have an LP collection of 7,500 records, and they're all opera. and so and so I think this is where all those beautiful themes in the score, the cells of things that might be, rock, or so that was beautiful. Personally, I had another challenge at the same time. So machine stops. I'm, post-pandemic. I'm in my cell, connecting with my son. All of those things, and studying the score, becoming Vashti. My husband is in the hospital, having his third stem cell transplant. Think about the machine stops. I had personal connection with that libretto, with the story. Science fiction was a reality to me. I felt like, is this the past? Is this the present? Is this the future? I just, so I had to, it was challenging on that level.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I think it's perhaps worth mentioning the name Vashti of that central character. I suddenly thought to myself, I know that name. And that's because if you grow up as a little Jewish girl, when Purim comes around, you are always wanting to dress up as Queen Esther. You never want to dress up as Queen Vashti, who is the first wife of Ahasuerus, who refuses to turn up when summoned by the king. She's throwing her own party. He's throwing a party. She's throwing a party. And he says, I want you to come in wearing your crown and appear before me and all these men. Now, the Midrash says that that is code for he wanted her to come in without anything except the crown. I don't know about that. But she refuses to come in. She will not appear when she is summoned by the king, and she is banished. We don't know whether she is killed. She just essentially disappears, and we move into the next part of the story where the king wants a replacement wife, who is Esther, and it is, of course, the book of Esther and the way in which she saves the Jews from extermination. But I had never, until reading this story and thinking about it, said to myself, Vashti is an early feminist, an early Jewish feminist of all things. And Brooks, Forster must be aware of this.
I have no idea.
You have no idea. I'm just wondering, because I mean, she's a biblical figure. So, Do we know? Has anybody commented on this? Or is this my very own discovery?
Keep in mind that very few people have commented on the machine stops in its original source, and there's a reason for that.
There could be. There could be.
And actually, one of the ironies that hit me when I was reading this was that in a lot of ways, opera does a better job, and this opera in particular does a better job of getting at the things that were under Forster's skin, because it does focus on the human. It focuses on the mother and the son. And magically, there aren't any machines that we actually have to look at. And this is what happens in science fiction film when you see all of the technology and you see everything, and you think, well, that's kind of cool. And the fact that there was enough information on the set to remind us that this is in a machine society. But what I absolutely loved was the fact on the set that the main focus is actually on the reading desk, you know, and I just thought that was perfect.
Absolutely.
One other irony here in terms of science fiction. In the 1930s, American science fiction was basically written in the pulps, and the pulp writers were paid, you know, half cent or a penny a word. And they were writing for anything and everything. They really didn't have any teleology. It was just like, let me get some words out and find somebody who will publish it. And a lot of them weren't very good at psychology, and they weren't very good at interiority. And so in an awful lot of 30s science fiction, whenever they want to access emotion, they will simply print the lyrics to a couple of songs, because that became a shorthand for them. If there's a song in it, this must be emotional.
I know that a number of you, in fact, I think a majority of you have seen this opera, but there are some who haven't, and there are, perhaps you aren't, your memories from a year ago aren't quite as sharp as they might be. So we thought it would be a good thing to show you a few scenes from the opera. And we've got 3 of them, is that right,
Yes.
Cecile? And Cecile is going to give you a little bit of context for each one, although the first one is the very beginning of the opera. Am I right? So what we're going to do is we're going to move, so we're not blocking the screen, and let Cecile introduce them and then regroup after that. Okay, great, thank you.
So as Miriam said, in this first clip, which is at the very beginning of the opera, a young man whom we will get to know as Kuno laments a society he has never known.
Long, long ago, for a very long time, for a very short time, for a space, for an iota. Or so I have heard, for I was not conceived yet, and the machine of our machines, was also not conceived yet. Long, long ago, for a very long time, I've heard man was the measure. Man's feet were a measure for distance. His hands were a measure of time. Our bodies of men and of women, oh, we were the measure of all that was desirable and strong. For strength was the measure of a man, and not his demise. No, not his demise. Long, long ago, for a very long time.
Just to remind you, before we start the next clip, what's happened so far is that Kuno has called his Mother Vashti and asked her to visit him in person. Well, she hasn't left her room in years, so she refuses. But later, as you'll see in this clip, she questions her refusal. Should she go see him? Several friends immediately zoom in from who knows where, reminding her that her son is not her responsibility. The machine will take care of him. Just you wait.
Thank you, love you, so long, so long, so long.
Kuno, should I go to him, Kuno? What do I owe him? What does he need? What is he to me? What does he mean to me? Children are propagating on conception, delivery, removal, the public nursery, parents' duty of cease at the moment of birth. Visits not required, communion the same, teaching completely contrary to the spirit of the age. Children propagating of conception, delivery, removal to the public nursery, parents' duties of cease at the moment of birth. Visits not required, communion the same, teaching completely contrary to the spirit of the age. Oh, you may still teach in matters of arcane history, ending your learned soliloquy. With homage to the age. Oh, you may still teach in matters of arcane history, ending your learned soliloquy with homage to the age, to the machine you mean. Oh no, should I go to him? He said something tremendous, he said, happening, something is happening. Now what could he possibly mean? Should I go to him? Oh, what is he to me? What the darkness, such darkness,
And the emptiness, such darkness, I can't breathe.
Beside I have simply not the time.
In Act 2, Kuno reveals to his mother that he has climbed out of their underground existence up to the surface of the earth, where he tells her there are people. He knows because he has met one. Vashti slowly begins to believe Kuno might be telling the truth. What else has the machine lied about?
She came to me, she came to me, because she could, she had a mind, she was free.
How could this be? How could this possibly be? If someone is sentenced to homelessness, one cannot survive. If homeless, one cannot survive, as we know, as we were told by the... And tell me you did not approach this, whatever you claim it to be. Tell me you kept your distance.
So I said to her, hello, and she answered, I asked her, who are you? And she answered, she came to me because she could. She had a mind. She was free.
Oh, you must believe me. Up there, you saw nothing at all. You were exhausted. You were starving. And now I think you're diseased.
And then she touched me.
She touched you, oh, my stars.
Do you know that place in the sky where one star is very bright and another keeps pace as if they are one bright star? So high, so wild, for when she touched my face, she took my breath away. Something about her, something. There was something.
Regroup. And I can just wait till you get through the whole thing. Really.
But that raises some questions for me. John, need you to come back. My first question is, I'm going to start with the last one, because that's, why is it that when he meets that homeless woman and she responds that there are no words? Or maybe I should say this. No, I mean, I I have a thought, but I wanted to know what you guys thought as to why at that moment. And this is the most fully realized, I think, expansion of the whole story. I mean, there's one reference, passing reference in the story to meeting somebody. Her above, right. And almost immediately after that, she's killed. So we don't have this. So I'm interested to know about the expansion of that relationship and then the choice not to give her words. Who wants to lead off on that one?
Well, I think it was my idea, wasn't it?
Pardon?
Wasn't it my idea?
Yes, you wanted, as I recall, you wanted something birdsong-like.
Yes.
So it immediately occurred to me, well, maybe not immediately, but soon after, that would be a good place for a coloratura aria.
Right.
You know, with the, and that's where I was thinking, like the Queen of the Night, she has words, but then it,
Yeah.
you know, she's singing a wordless aria for a good deal of that, and that's what I was thinking of when I wrote that.
Okay, that's interesting. I started thinking about, are words yet another kind of technology?
Yes.
And therefore, she doesn't have words. She's got sound, but she doesn't have words because words are their own technology, which in a way takes us back to the children's song, the second clip, because that book that you're reading from, am I right, is the book of the machine.
Yes.
It's got all the rules. It goes on for hundreds of pages, right?
It's a big book.
It's a big book, and everything is there. So when she is reading those words, she is, in effect, machine-like. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, and it's, the way it sounds, it's like an index, the way it's written.
Right.
Yeah.
And yet, it is the most cheerful music of the entire opera. And that's the thing I wanted to ask about, because it's a catchy, swingy kind of music. So I'm interested in the contrast between this very regimented index-like use of language and the music, which strikes me as, it's the one I can remember. It's the tune I can remember. And it must be fun to sing. Yeah?
Very much so.
Yeah. So is that a deliberate thing I'm seeing there, that contrast?
Well, I think you hit on it when you said it's like it's her language. It's that's the way she expresses herself. And that's it goes back to the innocence, that she's living on the surface of the earth, she's homeless, she's innocent. And
that's the homeless woman. But
Yes.
how about the children's song
okay.
that Vashti sings when she's holding the book, Parents' Duties
Okay.
of?
I thought of it as, like when I was listening to music early on in the 60s, there would be people like Frank Zappa or Country Joe McDonald. There would be lots of parodies. So that's where that was my impetus for doing that. This is the you have Dr. Strangelove, which is he's riding the nuclear bomb and laughing and waving his hat, and he had Country Joe McDonald singing, so put down your books, pick up a gun, gonna have a whole lot of fun. It's kind of like this a jovial way of getting into something that's dark.
It's a very jaunty tune, isn't
Yeah.
it? Yes. Okay. And then I think we got in the first clip, long ago, which gives us the background, but did we also not get Kuno signing off the phone call that he asks her to come, saying, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, love you so long.
Love you so long.
Yeah.
And those kind of little phrases keep returning. And as I said to John when we were starting this evening, when I was watching this again, I realized that the opening words of this opera are long ago, and the closing words are so long, so that in a way we come round to it. Your questions and thoughts? Yes, please.
Wouldn't the homeless woman be expressing that kind of joy because she was free?
Because she's free. I love it.
And it's the contrast of the machine, enslaving the mind and the person in the machine.
Absolutely. I think you're right. And Kuno says that because she could, she was free. Absolutely. And I think it's interesting that he's the one who, both in the first clip we saw, man is the measure, and in this, he's the one who's expressing what one might call the humanistic spirit that Forster wishes could triumph in this world. Great, thank you. Other questions you have or thoughts, please. This is your chance. Talkback means you get to talk too. Questions you want to raise about the opera or the Forster short story? Things.
Ed, have you got any comments?
Yes. At one of the early workshops of this opera that we did, somebody's made the comment that wordless song that the homeless woman sings was the most beautiful music they had ever heard. And of course, we were happy with that. That was nice to see. But I would like to say that producing and directing the music for this opera was one of the highlights of my musical career. To work with people like Cecile and John, who it's just a miracle what they did. and to have the privilege of working with Élise and the other singers who are just fine musicians, and for the first great orchestra, I mean, I was in heaven. It was an experience I will never forget.
Absolutely. Other questions you have about any of the things either you saw or that you remember seeing? No?
Miriam, let me say that
Brooks.
when the homeless woman appears, I was just thinking, oh God, don't let her say any words.
Really?
It's because if Forster would have tried to put words in her mouth, it would have been terrible. And I will say that one of the great joys of watching the opera is that the surface of the earth is made way more desirable by that scene than anything Forster did in the story. In fact, in the story, you know, there's mist and there's mud, and there's just nothing else. But I thought that was a real plus. And another real plus was the fact that I think Kuno and Vashti come off way better in the opera than they do in the story. They're really not very attractive characters in the story, at least the way I read it.
Because?
Well, because they're both failures in a way. I mean, what's important about Kuno is that, okay, he makes it almost to the surface. I get the idea, it's a little weird, but you get the idea that his head pops up out and he's looking around, but he doesn't actually spend much time on the surface. And then he never goes back. You know, he stops. He doesn't follow through. And in terms of Vashti, I will say that the death scene, you know, there redeems both of them in a way that the story doesn't.
Spoiler alert, sorry about that.
Oh, well.
It's opera.
It's opera, yeah. Yeah. Well,
I did want to.
Yeah, Sharon?
So, since I have insider knowledge, so at least I'll
Sharon is our manager.
I'll put you on the spot a little bit. I know that you said at one time that this is not the kind of opera that you were, say, trained to sing, and not the kind that you're used to singing, so it really presented special challenges, and I wondered if you could talk a little bit about that.
It's a question for Élise about the special challenges of singing this kind of opera.
You might think it would go, it didn't go, you know, so.
Yeah, I think well, I think the second, when she reads off the book, all the protocols, and there are a lot of switches, and you heard one of them where it almost goes to swing a little bit. So you have,
Yes.
And with Maestro, he was very patient with me. I would feel like, I think we're like, I don't know, changing times a little bit. You know, I did Carmen a lot, Bizet, Massenet, you know, French mezzo-soprano, and I've done Ghost of Versailles, you know, I've done some modern operas, but I think maybe the change of gear of styles was new. And the tessitura, I had, there was, which part was, I mean, it was a low G, so it was lower, maybe it stole a little bit from musical theater, which I do not do. I do a little bit of crossover during the summer at the music festival, but I am an opera singer, and so yeah, fast and so yeah, so those challenges were. So I want to do it again. I think I do a better job now. You know, the second time you do something, it gets easier. So, but I learned a lot.
Well, you did an amazing job.
No, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
But you know, the swing thing, you can blame Frank Zappa for that, because I listened to him. He was just always going all over the place, changing keys and tempos and whatnot. And so I threw a little of that in there.
I had to loosen up a little bit. You know? I had to count on 2 and yeah.
Well, and when you say loosen up, I mean, it's interesting to me because you saw the costume, and we're looking at late 19th, early 20th century. I mean, something contemporary with when Forster wrote it, but it's all buttoned up, right? The hair isn't, but it's still up and so forth. And the chorus, or they're called, what are they called? The
Friends.
The Friends, right. They also, they're buttoned up. The men have hats and so forth. And that kind of repression in the costumes, and it's contrasted by Kuno, who is just there in the shirt, the suspenders and so forth, but there's nothing formal about his look at all. And it strikes me that that's visually, that's important, that we see her as somehow bound in, and that's what the machine has done to her. Whereas the homeless woman, everything is flowing, her hair, well, she doesn't have hair as long as yours, but when the same actor appeared as the flight attendant, she's, again, all buttoned up. She's got a vest that's almost military looking and so forth. She's got boots on. Here she's barefoot, and the clothes flow. And so the freedom is there. And it strikes me that visually we see that. And by the very end, in a sense, there's some visual liberation for Vashti as well, yes?
Yes, and I felt that throughout. I mean, I think, it's the opera. I love to die, so. And that is a beautiful scene that you have written. It's and we feel that. The let go, you know.
The let go.
Yeah, and the light. It was beautifully. Stage 2, it was, and then with Maestro in the pit, I mean, that, yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
and also the kind of repetition that I think this opera is built on, that is, you saw the homeless woman touching Kuno's face and so forth, and what we wait for is what we get at the end, when finally his mother touches his face, and when she kisses him on the forehead. And so that the romance is not the male-female romance in a kind of conventional sense, but it is the mother who says, what is it? I do not have the time. Yeah, and we heard that, each syllable kind of clipped off like that. So our payoff is they're coming together, even though they're dying. Well, he's dead at the very end, but I think that's what brings us all together. Right. Yes, good.
I wanted to ask how much input, Cecile, you had on the set design, the costume design, the lighting. I mean, I was so impressed with how those carried your story. Did you work with those people? I mean, they did a wonderful job, but tell me about that interaction.
I really didn't. I just trusted them. They've had a lot of experience and worked with Ed quite a bit. So I was busy putting the captions on.
Yeah, John?
One comment I wanted to make about the opera is, Cecile, I didn't really get into the machine stop story. I did read it, but I was going by what Cecile gave me. And what occurred to me, and this was contrary to what, again, like what Mr. Landon was talking about, that Forster portrayed the characters in one way, but just from Cecile's libretto, I just said, I see these people as, giving their all to struggle with a hard situation, You know, I saw that Vashti she was just trying to do her best with what she had. And Kuno was the same. He's trying to break through this, and they finally did. But I thought, I never considered that these characters were in any way compromised, including the friends. I just thought they're doing the best they can in a bad situation.
Mm. So you're not judging them?
Well, yeah, that's in essence what I was doing. Yeah, I wasn't judging them for
Yeah.
anything.
Yes.
This is more of a comment, but I'm with a local radio station. We were fortunate enough to interview John and Cecile and Ed and Mary before it aired, and it's going to be airing this week, but you can also go to our KICI is the radio station. You can go to our SoundCloud page or YouTube channel, and if you want to approach me, I'll give you more information. But so to hear the complete interview online.
Thank you.
Thank you, Greg.
Thank you very much. And thank you all for joining us. I hope that the YouTube link comes out soon, because I have to say that preparing for this and being allowed a sneak peek and being able to see it has been really an emotionally challenging but very, very powerful experience. And I want to say thank you to all of you for telling us about your work.